Hey guys, Phil Sma here with a Ruby on Rails video, and let's talk about logging. I don't know about your logging, but my logging pretty much sucks. So when I was at RailsConf 2024, I saw a great talk from Youssef Boulkaid, and he talked about logging and enhancing your logging, and I'm going to do the similar kind of thing here with my code for ZonMaster. What we're going to do is go through and kind of look at the state of things as they are. And, there's two kinds of logging. And I'm going to talk about this in the video a lot, but there's two kinds of logging. There's the default logging, the exceptions, and so on and so on. And then there's programmatic logging that we use to kind of figure out what's going on in our application. We're going to deal with both of those in this video, which is quite long. So we are going to end up taking our logging out of this horrible way that Rails does it by default and putting it into Elasticsearch and with Logstash and be able to examine those logs through the GUI using Kibana. I'm going to talk you through and walk you through everything that I did to get that happening. And I'm going to do it along with you, and probably I'm going to screw it up. So I hope you enjoy. Let's get down to making our logs better. So we're going to take a look at the logging, as I said in the intro. And I'm going to do this using actually the real ZonMaster code base, because that's where I've got the problem. So as we can see, we've got the ZonMaster here. And the first thing I'm going to do is, well, what's the goal here? I've said all this in the intro, but just to recap, we want to have better logging that can include better data so we can get better analytics and understand what's going on. And the first thing to do that is, in my experience, to use LogRage. Let's go and see if we can find LogRage here. LogRage. And LogRage, it changes the output of the Rails logging. Kind of the problem we've got with the Rails logging is that it's all over the place and all over the time. So LogRage changes it, so it takes all that stuff that normally gets spurt out into the log during the course of a request and puts that in one line at the bottom. And so that's a step in the right direction. So at least we have everything in one place. But as he says, it's opinionated. So it removes the action view logging, including the rendering time for partials. So if that's very important to you, then LogRage is not for you. But as it's not so important for me, we're going to use it. So let's go to the bottom and start adding some stuff for logging. First one is LogRage. Where are we? There we are. So we're going to bundle. This shouldn't take long because I've probably got it already done once. Go, and so we're going to have that. Now let's go through the rather arduous process of getting ZonMaster up and running for you. Compose minus D, so let's get the Docker running. It's amazing, some of these tools like Docker, such a pain in the butt. All right, so let's try that one more time. I do everything inside of Docker, as I've probably said many times on this channel. So I have all the databases and the Elasticsearch that we use for, ZonMaster proper, Redis and everything. That's all inside of a Docker container, supposedly to make life easier, but there you go. And everything's running, so that's running, and I prefer to use ngrok, so we're going to get that running, and then procfile, get that running. So in theory, I can go here and let's give it a try, admin tenants, and sign in. Okay, stop that. So we've got our dashboard panel, and if we go and take a look, where are we? That one. It looks like we don't have any logging at all because we've got LogRage installed but not enabled. So by default, it is not enabled. So let's go over to application RB and do some stuff for the logging. So LogRage. First thing, of course, we want to do is turn it on. And that will be a big enough improvement right there. And we're going to use a formatter. Spoilers, we're going to use Logstash eventually, so why don't we just use a Logstash formatter? But you know what, for now, actually, I'm not going to do anything. We're just going to enable it. Okay, so it's just enabled. We're going to restart that. So anything you change in those files, like the environments, you need to restart to do. And then we'll go back. We saw before there was no logging. Interesting. So let's refresh the page. And now we can see in a second. We'll let it get to the end. Here's that kind of LogRage output. Got a method, path, format, and so on and so forth. If I find this, we'll see we've got a few of them. Index, status, allocations, holy cow, duration is that, blah, blah, blah. So we've got this. And then we've got it a few places because it calls, this page calls another method or another request for all the graphs. So you can see we've already got all of that in one nice place. We can see the allocations. We can see how long it took and how long it was in the view in the database. Great. So that's pretty good. I think that's already a step in the right direction as far as conglomerating our logs. And the next thing we want to do is probably, let's do the formatting, Logstash, and let's restart again. And you'll see that Logstash is a kind of JSON. I'm not sure the quite right way to say that. JSON or JSON output. And we don't have Logstash event installed. So let's get that going. This is Logstash event. I think we need Logstash logger. Yeah. Let's quickly bundle that up. Dun, dun, dun. As I said in the intro, this talk was greatly inspired by the talk I saw at RailsConf. First time to go to a RailsConf. And hopefully we should get something there we already saw in there. So let's take a look at that. Copy. So we can, now this is what we're getting as an output. So it's more of a hash. So we've got the format, the controller, the action, so on and so forth. You've got a timestamp to tell you when it happened, version, message. That's pretty good already, right? Like, we're getting a lot of data there that we need. This pretty much already replaces the logging that we were doing before for requests. So what else could we do? We could make this have a little bit more info. And not in this particular case, but if we might want to have more information in that log that's specific to our use. And for me, that means adding some fields. And you have to do this in kind of a roundabout way. So we're going to do, first thing, we're going to append info to payload, which is a built-in thing that will get called around, it's in the instrumentation API of an action controller. And every time an action, after an action is processed, this method is invoked with the payload so you can add more information, which is exactly what we want to do. So what we're gonna do, more stuff that we want in there. So first let's call super, and then we're gonna payload merge. And what do we want to add? I would like to add the request ID, which is that request ID on the object. And let's add the user agent. And then current context. So for me, I always have a tenant. So let's do the tenant can do like this: tenant name and ID, which is this. Okay. And then we can do the same for user. Payload. So what we've done here is add in some data that we'll need and we're going to see later. So the request ID, the user agent, the info about our tenant, and the currently logged in user. And if I run this, and I'm going to put this thing here so we can see, I'm not going to print out the payload because it's a bit pointless. But I want to print this little thing here so that you can see it's getting called. There, so we see it all over the place. So that's the one from our log. So it's getting called, but if you look at this next line, nothing's different. That stuff that we added isn't there. And that's because while you add it to the payload, I'm not quite sure why this is, LogRage doesn't actually output it. So what you need to do is write a little doohickey inside the application RB, which will add some custom options to the output. And what it will do is create a tenant. Now, so we're going to do payload tenant ID. I'm doing this for ease of use later on when we put it into Logstash. User request ID, we're not going to use a correlation ID here and that. So now we have these options added to LogRage Let's restart because we've changed application RB. I may be saying this with confidence, but I have no confidence that this is going to work, this whole demo. Here we go. So let's refresh. And oh my gosh, there's one right there. Look at it. Now we have a full-on info. You can see the tenant ID, tenant name, the user ID, my email. Remember not to put anything in here that is, identifying information. Email, in my opinion, doesn't count. So request ID, user agent, timestamps, and so on. And finally, the message, which is that we got that URL. And we look for another one. This is the one that from pulling the data in a format is interestingly that. Get chart data. And see, it has no tenant, so it's not being set, but we still have the user ID because I was logged in. And yeah, great. So I think we've got already a lot more data here. You can do this. Another thing you can do, if you have things in parameters and you want to see parameters, which of course is another natural thing for people to want to see, and parameters often have that personal identifying information. This is stuff that we put ourselves in the payload, so we should know better than putting like somebody's password in there, right? But maybe you want to log the parameters and you're worried about PII in the parameters. And then we can do something called custom payload, which is like custom options, but different. So it puts some more stuff in there. We were going to remove controller in action because you can see LogRage already has that. Excuse me. But it's going to pull out the filter. We're using the filtered parameters. So that means that what Rails does to filter the parameters and password, and you know that you can set filtered parameters in other places and say what's not going to be shown. So it's going to add a params block that will have the parameters except it'll be filtered. And I can prove that to you. Just thought about this. So if I add a parameter that's password equals hi fills my, let's get rid of that. It should now output this. And let's see if we have parameters. That. Did I not save it? Sometimes I don't save things. It's my old brain. This got a bit of a long video. Maybe it's boring, but I think some people are going to need this extra info. I know I did. So now let's do it. Go params. Whoops. Params. And it's, oh, that's not the right one. Where's the first one? Here. There, password filtered. So the password, that parameter filtering is working. We don't have to worry about doing the thing like Youssef talked about in his presentation where Facebook accidentally put people's passwords in plain text in a log file for years. So there we go. I think pretty cool stuff, and we're using the right formatter. So where can we go from here? For me, this is already a step in the right direction for replacing kind of the Rails default logging. Okay. Now, there's two ways to do logging. two kinds of logging, in my opinion. The default logger, this kind of stuff that is written by Rails on the request usually, and then there's custom logging, which is logging that you do as the developer to see what the hell is going on inside of your software. So we're going to draw a line under this default logging by adding the final piece, which is saving this. Now, of course, in production, we wouldn't have all this other gubbins here, right? But we still want to have this line in something interesting, saved. And so what we're going to do is use another Docker container. Where are you? And this guy, or this person, it's an Elasticsearch ELK powered by Docker and Docker Compose. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to run another Elasticsearch ELK, Elasticsearch Logstash and Kibana. And we're going to run another stack, which of course is what I would recommend to do in production as well. You don't want to gum up your production system with logging data. So I've downloaded the Elastic ELK, and so put you over here. Docker ELK, Docker Compose, down -c. Let's just trash it all. Okay, we can actually delete that. And so what Docker ELK does is give you that stack. It does not work as expected out of the box because you need to configure. So the first thing you need to have things like passwords, and I needed to alter Logstash. So what we would do here is Docker Compose setup or up setup. And okay. What you need to do, well, you got a password. So you need to change a few things. First of all, you're given an env file. Of course, you're going to update that. You want to set your Elastic's version for this. We can use the latest, which maybe is 8.13.3. Sounds pretty recent to me. I'm using an older version of Elasticsearch for ZonMaster because I need to connect to it with the Rails gem, and the Rails gem is versioned, and we're on version 7 of Elasticsearch for that. So you got set a password, which is fine, change me. And that's all you need to do in the env file is to set the password. And then in the Docker Compose file, I found I didn't have to change anything. Sounds great. But in the Docker file for Logstash, I needed to add the Logstash plugin to show JSON, to be able to filter that, because we need, so you add the plugin for Logstash, filter JSON, and you don't need to change anything in there. And then in the conf, you need to add this block, and that is saying the message is coming from Rails. Let's parse that out as JSON. And having done that, you can run this. And now we can send our logs What you see zipping on behind me is me realizing that I'd screwed up the whole Docker ELK thing, and I re-downloaded it and restarted it again. Doesn't discount everything I said before that. I don't know what I had done something weird with the image or something like that. So by the time I'm finished talking right now, the thing behind me should be done, and we should be caught up, and everything should be fine. Okay, let's discover. So we don't have any data. Well, we do have something. That's interesting. Oh, yeah. That's me just now connecting. Let me take a look at this. This is me connecting using curl there. But what I'm going to do, finally, is let's send our logging information to Logstash. How do we do that? Well, it's in development, because presumably it would be different in development than production. So we're going to add a block here. Just add this at the top. And what we're saying is we're going to create the logger is going to be we didn't do that over here, but here we set a formatter, but we didn't actually say where it was going to log to. And LogRage by default is just going to log to that file. But if we're using the Logstash logger gem and so on, we can create this new Logstash logger, and we can say we want it to go to more than one place. So we're going to put the output to a file. In my opinion, it should be sync true, just like this should be. We're going to output to the file, and we're going to send to Logstash host and Logstash port. And what are those? Let's go to the end file. And let's add some Logstash host of localhost Logstash port of 50,000. And that's the port. If we go and look at Docker, where are you? Logstash is on port 50,000. So let's stop our Rails instance, start the Rails instance. Let's hope that it starts. I think I'm going to have to take a little break out to this because my machine is grinding to a halt. So it's running. I'm going to clear that. And now I'm going to refresh the page. Where are you? This one, right? Won't need that password. And we are now logging. We should still see our stuff written out because we're essentially tailing. That's interesting. So that's gone. So we have info to payload, but remember before right there, we had it written out. So I'm not quite sure. I'll have to check that in a second. But if we go here, close you, let's refresh. And we should, God willing, there it is. We have our events, and I'm going to take a look at one. So this is the main one. And we can now see we've got the action index on the controller, how much time is spent in the database, the duration of the entire call, the format, what host we're on, and so on and so forth. So all of this info has been popped out of the original event, and you can see it's all there. Great. So we have everything that our logging is now going into Logstash. Now the great question is, why isn't it also going to a file? And if I shut down, it's there in the file. Maybe it doesn't go out to console then. So there we go. I think that's a step in the right direction. Kind of part one of replacing the default logger with Logstash and a whole ELK stack. All right, I'm going to take a little break. That's part one. Will I do this all in one video? I don't know. Stick around and find out. So that was the end of part one. I hope you're having a coffee, and I hope you're watching this on faster than normal speed, because I know I take a long time. And now we're going to get into part two, which is talking about the application logging, this programmatic stuff that we can do to track where, what our application is doing and stuff like that. Let's get on with it. So like I said before, there are two kinds of logging. There's the kind of Rails default logging that shows you things like, durations of view times and render times and how long the call took and things like that. And that also includes usually some kind of exception logging. But really, there's another kind of logging, what I'm calling, because I didn't research what you really call it, what I'm calling developers logging, which is when you are writing stuff out to log files to kind of keep track of what's going on inside of your application, sometimes during development process, but not always. For example, inside of ZonMaster, we're often, read constantly, downloading reports from Amazon, processing those. I'd like to be able to see what reports have been called for a particular client, how long those reports took, and perhaps see any kind of bottlenecks and things like that. Maybe something's running too often, all of that kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is create a logger and put that stuff into the same Elasticsearch database. I'm doing something similar like that, but right now I'm writing it to a file. This is much, much easier. Let's take a look at how I would do that. So I have a thing in initializers called loggers, where I create an awful lot of log files and use them for different purposes. Let's work on that. Excuse me. So what you can see, and we're just going to take a look right now at the Amazon logger here. So we're going to create a file, make sure it's set to sync so it automatically flushes, and then we're going to assign that to a global, and then the Rails community is going to freak out, and then I'm going to set the log level based on whether we're in development or not. So how can we replace this with something that will log to Logstash? So the first thing, of course, is let's get rid of this logger new. That's just using the Rails standard logger. We can leave the log level if we want, but let's create Amazon logger, and let's make it a Logstash logger. And what we're going to do is, yes, exactly right. We're going to do a multi-delegator. Now, we saw that before. Remember that these logs are different. I could write them to the same file, but I'm not going to. So this is the stuff that I sent when I was going to the development log. So actually what we could do is just copy all that, paste that here, and for the output file, we're going to say log file, which is the file that we've set up. And then we're going to dump it out to Logstash. Now, because this is different, we need to do some other stuff. Now, we can either do it on every file, or we can do it in general, and I prefer to do it in general. So what I'm going to do is, for all of our log stashes, we're going to run the configure block, and we're going to customize the event, and we're going to set, again, the tenant ID and the tenant name if there is actually a tenant. Tenants, I'm using a fork, my own fork of the Milia gem, which is called Filia, and it's a tenanting gem. So I'm using that. So we're going to grab the current tenant ID and put it in, and then that will get merged into the event and sent off to Logstash. Now, where do I use this Amazon logger? And the answer is lots of places, but let's particularly find one, let's say maybe in one of the processors here. What's a good one? FBA inventory? Sure. Yeah, maybe not that one. Where is that? Shipment info is a good one. So, see, I'm writing kind of a debug message here, an info message here. And this goes through kind of every CSV file in the file that we get, every CSV entry in the file we get, and parses it. Sorry, I'm stammering a little bit. Okay, so instead of doing it like that, here's kind of the big one. This is the Amazon logger where I put the store name, I am saying what report it is, and what report number it is, and that it's finished. Here's something that I didn't really know until I started to delve into logging. What I've always done is this kind of thing. So Amazon logger .info, my info here. And if I had to interpolate some stuff, tenant, current tenant ID, I would do it like that. But you know what? You can do it another way, which works beautifully with Logstash. And that is, you say message. Okay, we're finished. Just gonna message. This finished. And then we can do something like, okay, report ID. Is this Amazon report? Generate a report num? Yeah, you're going to complain because I didn't do that. Report num, we can say tenant ID is the, sure, why not? Amazon store tenant ID. Store ID is the store ID. Row count is the row count. We can do store name, which is the Amazon store log name. And just to make things pretty, we'll do the tenant name. I guess I should have done that up here. Tenant name, which is the tenant log name. So now we have something like that. And we could also log our duration. Now, maybe you want to do a duration. Where are we? We're not doing the row. This is for the whole file. So why don't we do a start? So we've got that already. Build row start. No, because that's the row. Why don't we do something like this? Process CSV start, time current. And then we can do a duration here. So now we'll have the duration of how long that took. And we can get rid of this. We don't need it anymore. And if we really want to, we can say report type, which should be the Amazon report. Report type. And then you would argue that this could just be process CSV finished. And you could even say FBA shipment info process CSV finished. Anything else we want to particularly run on? Marketplace nums, are we doing anything with that? No. So now this will write out, and I want to show you an example of this. So I'm going to try and find, here we are. Let's refresh this. We haven't done anything in the last 15 minutes because I took a little break for tea. And why don't we find, let's go into Rails, the console. Now, there's more sophisticated stuff that I haven't yet even delved into. Oh my. Uninitialized constant Rails logger. Amazon logger. Logger is here. Now, that's why this needs to be down there. And that is, obviously, a lot of this is being run inside of Sidekick. We can put into the Sidekick jobs using middleware, things like who actually requested this or how it got in there. You know, this opens up a whole realm of possibilities. So I'm just going to look for an Amazon report. Scope.last. There's one. So we're going to set tenant, set current tenant to be 19424. And Amazon report. And we need a store, right? Okay. So we have all the variables we need. So I'm going to set that equals time current 10 minutes ago. Why not? And now I'm going to try and write this out. And I'll need a row count. I'm just kind of stubbing this in, obviously. So if I paste this, now, there we go. It's that easy. It really is. So we've got now in Elasticsearch or Kibana or Logstash, in that stack, we have this log record. So we could then filter on, tenant and get a list of all the tenants. We could see their durations. We could make some nice graphs about the duration that this particular report is taking. It's all of that. These are metrics. You may not be blown away by this. Maybe you're just like, yeah, this is normal stuff. But you know what? I think it's pretty cool. And we can also track down a lot of things. Find out if a report was processed or not. Right now, it's a bear, really, to figure that out. You'd have to write some custom reporting tools. Correct that. I would have to write some custom reporting tools. And whereas I could do all of this inside of Kibana just by creating some dashboard elements. Very interesting. I think that's all I'm going to cover for now. I think logging is a very interesting area that isn't talked about enough in Rails videos. I think this is a good one. I really appreciate Youssef Boulkaid at RailsConf 2024 doing his talk. That really inspired me to do this talk. He probably knows a lot more than I do, but I'm doing one, so there. I hope you've enjoyed it. So there we go. That's my video on logging. Probably not as good as what Youssef did at RailsConf, but I'm pretty happy with it. We've enhanced the quality of the data that we've got that we're logging. We've certainly enhanced the accessibility of that data by putting it into Elasticsearch. And I think we've kind of enriched the whole experience of data tracking using logging. Let me know what you think about these kinds of videos. Maybe this one was a little bit too long for you. Sorry about that. It was just a very complicated idea. Stick around, like, subscribe, bell notification, of course. And if you have any questions, drop them in a comment below and I'll try and address them. And if you think this video needs to be redone again with some additional information, tell me that too. I'm happy to do another video about logging. This was really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you soon.